Good evening, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and in this video, I'm going to tell you why white supremacism is wrong. As you may have observed, I am white. I don't think anyone would dispute that, but I don't think that whites are better in any way or morally superior, should be treated better, or other races should be mistreated. I hope this is an uncontroversial statement. Unfortunately, there are some people who disagree with me. So I'm explaining why racism is deeply wrong on all levels, morally wrong, just incorrect, moronic, malevolent. Race really is just skin deep. It's about phenotype. We have a certain appearance, and some people judge a book by its cover, and they assume that looking a certain way must reveal a lot about somebody's personality. It's a bit like the way people set so much store by clothes. And racism, it may be instinctive for some people. There's some sort of selfish gene theory about it, but that doesn't make it mean it's good. Some human instincts are bad, like some people have violent propensities and so forth. Racism is destructive, cruel, and inhuman. The crucial point is we're all related. Somewhere along the line, 3 million years ago, human beings started in the Rift Valley. So in that sense, we're all African. Some biologists believe that there was an Eve, not as described in Genesis, but a woman who is the ancestress of all human beings, although she seems to have had more than one husband stroke boyfriend. There's no clear racial boundary. We can't actually define who's white and who's not. How about pale-skinned Arabs? Are they white or not? How about people who mix race? People who are half black, half white. Many people don't count them as white, but they're just as much white as people who are half Chinese and half white. They're much white as they are black. Obama is as much white as he is black. There's this term Caucasian, and these German racial theorists came up in the 19th century, more or less randomly ascribed that word to whites, but it's got nothing to do with the Caucasus Mountains, like where Azerbaijan is. And if you say the three racial categories, Negroid, Caucasian, and Mongoloid, where are Indians? They're Caucasian. Arabs, they're all Caucasian. So it's far from obvious who's white and who's not. A pale-skinned Indian person, would you regard him or her as being white? So if whites can't be clearly defined, perhaps they don't really exist. It's nonsense to fuss over these categories. Race really is just skin deep, as I said. So who would believe that race is terribly important? Often they're people who are frankly stupid. Those of low intelligence or with low status jobs, one has to feel a bit sorry for them sometimes if they think race is the only thing they got going for them and they want to despise others. So they really emphasize their race as something to be proud of. I'm sort of indifferent to being white. Anyway, there have been good and bad white people throughout history. I mean, some white supremacists would point to achievements by people who happen to have not very much melanin, and that's true. But of course, there are people without much melanin who've committed the most horrific atrocities. I could point out to Nazis or all sorts of terrible despots, or even now white supremacists, villains, the KKK, the most despicable organization that ever existed in the United States. So, white people have treated me badly all the time, have stolen from me and stuff like that, been grossly insulting. So I shouldn't like them just because they happen to have roughly my skin tone. Likewise, if people of other races have been very kind to me. I had an African American colleague who went out of his way but to be particularly welcoming and helpful. Or let's say I've known Pakistani people to be incredibly hospitable to me. People of other races who've been very sweet to me, let's say Kazakh people who've been especially warm and helpful. So I shouldn't dislike them or think that they're lower than me. That would be preposterous and very ungrateful. So I ask people to just be indifferent to race. Now, some studies say that people are drawn to those of their race or they trust them more and so on, but that might be a social construct. They do these psychological experiments where people are in separate rooms and have to negotiate with somebody over a sum of money. Do they think they're going to be ripped off or not? If they believe this person is the same race as them, they trust them more and things like that. Anyway, I've gone days without meeting other whites. I used to travel in India on my own sometimes and be very much the ethnic minority, mingling with Indians all the time. So there isn't really a white culture. We have many different cultures, and I can have more in common with a non-white person a lot of the time. So from the Republic of Ireland, there are, let's say, Congolese people who are Irish citizens, and these black Irish people have as much right to live there as I do. Or let's say I'm also a citizen of the United Kingdom, and they're Chinese British people, and again, they have an absolute right to live there if they're citizens. And so I'd have more in common with them than I might with a white Frenchman or a white Spaniard, for example. So other races have been good to me, as my own race has been bad to me. Sometimes my own race has been good to me. And again, it's not blatant who counts as being in my race or not. So we must judge people as individuals and not be so fussed about putting people into categories and thinking that makes them good or bad. So what I say to these white supremacists is you've always got to ask yourself, how would you feel if it was the other way around? What if you were mistreated for being white? And I know it occasionally happens. That's rebarbative, and so it must follow that it's equally despicable to mistreat somebody else for their race. It's bullying, and it's shameful. It's disgraceful that anyone should suffer on account of their ethnicity. You must think of Kant's principle of universalizability. If you do this to others, you must accept that it's right for them to do it to you. Now, for the past few centuries, whites have been quite mighty, and mainly white countries have had the best military technology and so on. But it wasn't always the case. We go back enough centuries, say the Arabs were ahead in terms of science and technology, or the Chinese and Indians before that were streets ahead of the mainly white countries, which were in a state of barbarism in the Dark Ages. And that's going to come again. The white nations will not always dominate. The primarily white nations are about 10% of the world's population, and they're diminishing. China will be the world's superpower, maybe followed by India. So you white supremacists, you've got a nasty shock coming, because the mainly white countries are no longer going to be so powerful. So you better get used to it. Like in the United States, whites are about 65% of the population, and that figure is going to diminish and diminish. This Trump presidency may well be the white majority's last stand. So out of common decency, one should treat people of other races well, but there's also a bit of self-interest in that. If this appeal to morality doesn't work with you, you've got to make accommodation with the idea that whites are fewer in number and are less potent than they were. So we should all embrace brotherhood and be good to people of other races. I'll be honoured to marry a black lady. So far as I know, my ancestry is all white, but it wouldn't remotely upset me if I discovered I had other racial ancestry. I just thought about this as Irish. Like almost everyone else in Ireland, I almost certainly have English ancestry in the Middle Ages. There were Roman soldiers in ancient Britain, and some of those Roman legionaries came from North Africa. So through a Roman legionary, I might have a black ancestor millennia ago. That would be a matter of indifference to me if I were to discover it. Put it another way, as a hetero, the worst sin against nature you could commit is incest. So having children with someone of a different racial group would be the complete opposite of incest. So let's all intermingle. I look forward to more miscegnation, and wouldn't it be splendid for race relations if Prince Harry were to marry Meghan Markle? So say no to racism.